Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we're covering the biggest geopolitical stories as they happen. Today, we're talking about something that could change everything: Trump's war on Mexican cartels. After capturing Maduro in Venezuela, Trump has set his sights on the drug cartels operating just across the US border. Is military action coming? Could the US actually invade Mexico? Let's dive in. Let's start with the context. For decades, Mexican drug cartels have been operating with near impunity. They control vast territories, they've corrupted governments, and they're responsible for flooding the United States with deadly drugs like fentanyl. We're talking about organizations that make billions of dollars every year and have military-grade weapons. The two most powerful cartels right now are the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. The Sinaloa Cartel was once led by El Chapo, who's now serving life in prison in the United States. But the cartel didn't disappear. It's now run by El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos, and Ismael El Mayo Zambada. The CJNG, on the other hand, is newer but extremely violent. They're known for their brutality and their use of drones, explosives, and heavy weaponry. These aren't just drug dealers, they're paramilitary organizations. Now here's where it gets serious. Trump has been talking about military action against the cartels for years, but after the Maduro operation, people are starting to believe he might actually do it. In his first term, Trump floated the idea of designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs. That designation would allow the US military to target them directly, just like they target ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And now, in his second term, Trump is ramping up the pressure. He's talked about drone strikes, special operations raids, and even a full-scale military campaign. Senator Lindsey Graham, one of Trump's allies, has been pushing for this for years. Graham has said, quote, "We should use military force to destroy the drug labs, to kill the drug dealers, and to stop the flow of drugs into America," end quote. That's not just tough talk, that's a declaration of war. But here's the big question: can the United States legally invade Mexico? The short answer is no, not without Mexico's permission. Mexico is a sovereign nation, and launching military strikes on Mexican soil without their consent would be an act of war. It would violate international law. It would destroy the US-Mexico relationship, and it could destabilize the entire region. But Trump has shown with the Maduro operation that he's willing to push those boundaries. The legal justification the White House used for the Venezuela strike was protecting US personnel executing an arrest warrant. Could they use the same logic for Mexico? Maybe. If US agents were actively pursuing cartel leaders with Mexican arrest warrants, the administration could argue they're providing protection. But that's a very thin legal argument, and it would face massive pushback, both domestically and internationally. So what has Trump actually said about the cartels? In recent interviews, Trump has called the cartels, quote, "the greatest threat to American security," and said, quote, "We need to take them out, and we need to do it fast," end quote. He's also said that the fentanyl crisis is killing more Americans than any war, and that justifies military action, and he's not wrong about the numbers. According to the CDC, over 100,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in 2023, and the majority of those deaths involved fentanyl. Most of that fentanyl is manufactured in Mexico using precursor chemicals from China, and it's smuggled across the border by the cartels. So from Trump's perspective, this is a national security crisis that justifies military force. And after successfully capturing Maduro, Trump has momentum. His base loves the tough on crime, tough on drugs messaging, and the Maduro operation showed he's willing to act. Now let's talk about what Mexico thinks. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has made it very clear that Mexico will not accept US military intervention. In a recent statement, she said, quote, "Mexico is a sovereign nation, and we will resolve our own security issues. We do not need, nor will we accept, foreign military forces on our soil," end quote. And she's right to be concerned. The cartels are a Mexican problem, but they're also deeply embedded in Mexican society. Corruption is widespread, and the cartels have infiltrated police forces, the military, and even government officials. Any U.S. military action would be seen as an invasion, and it would unite Mexicans against the United States. It could also trigger a refugee crisis as violence escalates and civilians flee. We're talking about millions of people potentially crossing the border. So even if Trump wants to act, the consequences could be catastrophic. If you're enjoying this breakdown, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm push this video to more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're covering breaking news like this every week. Now let's keep going. But let's say Trump decides to act anyway. What would a military operation actually look like? There are a few scenarios. Scenario 1. Targeted drone strikes. The US could use drones to take out cartel leaders and drug labs, similar to how they target terrorists in the Middle East. This would be the least invasive option, but it would still be an act of war. Scenario 2. Special operations raids. US Navy, SEALs, or Delta Force could conduct raids to capture or kill high-value targets. This is what happened with Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. It's risky, but it's been done before. Scenario 3. A full-scale military campaign. This would involve airstrikes, ground troops, and a sustained military presence. This is the nuclear option, and it's highly unlikely. It would be a disaster for US-Mexico relations and could spark a regional conflict. Most analysts think Trump would go with scenario 1 or 2, limited, targeted strikes designed to send a message without committing to a long-term occupation. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. The cartels aren't sitting ducks. They have access to military-grade weapons, including .50 caliber rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and even armored vehicles. They've shot down military helicopters in Mexico before, and they're deeply entrenched in local communities, which means any military action would result in civilian casualties. That would turn public opinion against the United States, both in Mexico and around the world. Plus, the cartels are adaptive. If the US takes out the Sinaloa Cartel, or the CJNG, new cartels will rise to fill the power vacuum. We've seen this happen before. When the Colombian cartels were dismantled in the 1990s, the Mexican cartels took over. When El Chapo was arrested, the violence got worse, not better. So, military action might provide a short-term win, but it won't solve the long-term problem. And then there's the international reaction. If the US launches strikes on Mexico, what will other countries do? Mexico could appeal to the United Nations Security Council, just like Venezuela did after the Maduro operation. Countries like China, Russia, and even traditional US allies like Canada and the European Union could condemn the action. It could damage America's standing on the world stage and embolden adversaries. And let's not forget about Latin America. Countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Argentina have already expressed concerns about US military interventionism in the region. A strike on Mexico could unite Latin America against the United States, and that would have long-term consequences for trade, diplomacy, and security. So what happens next? Right now, Trump is in the planning stages. He's meeting with military advisors, intelligence officials, and members of Congress. He's building a case for action, and he's using the Maduro operation as proof that he can pull it off. But there are still major obstacles. Congress would likely have to authorize military force, and that's not a guarantee. Even some Republicans are hesitant about the idea of invading Mexico. And then there's Mexico itself. Sheinbaum is not Maduro. Mexico has a functioning democracy, a strong military, and close economic ties with the United States. A military strike would be far more complicated than the Venezuela operation. But if Trump is serious, and if he believes the fentanyl crisis justifies military action, then we could be looking at a conflict in the very near future. And that brings us to the final question. Should the US do this? On one hand, the cartels are a legitimate threat. They're killing Americans, they're destabilizing Mexico, and they're operating with impunity. Something needs to be done. On the other hand, military action could make things worse. It could trigger a refugee crisis, destroy US-Mexico relations, and lead to more violence, not less. The smarter approach might be to work with Mexico to strengthen their institutions, crack down on corruption, and cut off the cartel's financial networks. But that's a long-term solution, and Trump wants results now. So here's what I think. Trump will probably authorize limited strikes, drone strikes or special ops raids targeting high-value cartel leaders. He won't launch a full-scale invasion, but he'll do enough to show he's serious. And he'll use the fentanyl crisis as justification. Whether that's the right move or not, we'll have to wait and see. But one thing is clear. The war on cartels is no longer just talk. It's becoming a reality. All right, that's it for today's video. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you learned something new, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Do you think Trump should take military action against the cartels? I want to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. We're covering breaking news, geopolitics, and stories that matter. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.